You're sitting there, maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, scrolling through your phone, and you see one of those posts. You know the ones. Someone you went to high school with just bought their second rental property. A coworker mentions they're basically set for early retirement. Your cousin posts about hitting some investment milestone that sounds like a number from a different planet. And you look at your own situation. Maybe you've got some money saved. Maybe you've got a decent job. But 40 is either already here or you can see it on the horizon. And there's this voice in the back of your head asking a question you really don't want to answer. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Here's the thing nobody tells you about turning 40. It's not actually a deadline. It's not a finish line, but it is one of those moments where life kind of forces you to look in the mirror financially. And for a lot of people, that reflection is uncomfortable. Not because they've failed, but because they're realizing for the first time that the things they assumed would just happen, the wealth, the stability, the freedom, those things don't just happen, they get built. And if you haven't been building intentionally, the results show. But here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. If you're watching this and you're behind where you think you should be, that's not the end of your story. It's actually a really important beginning. Because the difference between people who end up financially secure and people who don't isn't about starting perfect. It's about waking up and getting serious, even if that wake-up call comes later than you planned. I'm Alex, and I spend a lot of time thinking about money. Not just the math of it, but the psychology, the emotions, the weird ways our brains trick us into bad decisions. If this kind of content helps you see your finances differently, consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It really does help the channel. And more importantly, it means you'll keep getting these reality checks when you need them. So let's talk about what you probably should have accomplished by age 40, financially and professionally. And then, more importantly, let's talk about how to catch up if you're not there yet. Because I'm not here to make you feel bad, I'm here to give you a map. There's this myth floating around that by 40 you should have it all figured out. The big house, the impressive title, the investment portfolio that lets you casually mention your financial advisor at dinner parties. Social media has turned this into a highlight reel that makes everyone feel inadequate. But here's what the actual data shows, and it's way more interesting than the Instagram version. According to surveys from the Federal Reserve, about 60% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency with cash on hand. That's not just young people starting out. That includes people well into their 40s and 50s. The median retirement savings for households where the head is between 45 and 54 is somewhere around $100,000. Sounds okay until you realize that's maybe 3 to 5 years of modest retirement income. And that's the median, meaning half of households have even less. The truth is, most people aren't crushing it by 40. Most people are somewhere between doing okay and quietly panicking. And if that's you, the first thing I want you to do is take a breath. You're not uniquely bad at this. The system is not designed to make building wealth easy, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means you need to be intentional in ways that previous generations maybe didn't. So what should a financially healthy 40-year-old actually look like? Let me give you some realistic benchmarks, not Instagram fantasy numbers, but actual targets that financial planners and researchers consistently point to. First, an emergency fund. This is the foundation everything else sits on. By 40, you should ideally have 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved in something accessible, like a high-yield savings account. Not invested in stocks, not tied up in retirement accounts you can't touch. Just boring, liquid cash you can get to if life falls apart. And life does fall apart sometimes. Cars break, jobs, medical bills show up. This money isn't exciting, but it's the thing that keeps everything else from crumbling. Second, some kind of portfolio or net worth checkpoint. A common rule of thumb is that by 40, you should have somewhere around 2 to 3 times your annual salary saved and invested. So if you make $75,000 a year, you'd want to be in the range of $150,000 to $225,000 in total retirement savings and investments. This isn't a magic number, but it's a sign that you're on a trajectory where compounding can actually do meaningful work for you over the next 25 years. Third, at least one income stream beyond your day job. This doesn't mean you need a thriving business or a side hustle that's taking over your life. It means having some evidence that you can generate value and income from more than one source. Maybe it's freelance work. Maybe it's a rental property. Maybe it's a small online business or investments that generate dividends. The point is diversification of income, because relying on a single paycheck from a single employer is one of the riskiest financial positions you can be in. Fourth, debt under control. Specifically, non-mortgage, high-interest debt should be gone by 40. Credit cards, personal loans, car loans with crazy interest rates. Mortgage debt is different. It's often low interest and tied to an asset that generally appreciates. But carrying $10,000 or $20,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest into your 40s is like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks. Every dollar going to interest payments is a dollar not working for your future. Fifth, and this one's underrated, established financial habits. By 40, you should have systems in place, a budget you actually follow, even if it's simple, automatic transfers to savings and investment accounts, regular check-ins with your financial situation, at least quarterly. The people who build wealth aren't necessarily smarter or higher earning, they've just built habits that run on autopilot. Now, if you're looking at this list and feeling a pit in your stomach because you're missing most of it, I need you to stay with me, because understanding why people fall behind is just as important as knowing the targets. Life doesn't happen in a straight line. Some people had their 20s derailed by the 2008 financial crisis. Some people graduated into a job market that didn't exist. Some people had medical emergencies, family obligations, divorces, layoffs, or just made a series of small decisions that seemed fine at the time but added up to a big hole. Here's what behavioral economists have found about money and decision-making. When you're in scarcity mode, when you're constantly worried about making rent or covering the next bill, your brain literally changes how it processes decisions. You become more focused on immediate problems and less capable of long-term planning. It's not a character flaw, it's how human psychology works under stress. Studies have shown that financial stress reduces cognitive bandwidth in measurable ways. You're not dumb for falling behind. You were probably operating with half your mental resources while trying to navigate an incredibly complex financial landscape. And let's talk about that landscape for a second. Housing costs have exploded relative to incomes over the past 2 decades. Healthcare costs are a wild card that can wipe out years of savings. Education costs have risen far faster than wages. The game is genuinely harder than it was for previous generations, even if nobody wants to admit it at Thanksgiving dinner. But here's the thing about being 40 or close to it. You still have time. 25 years until traditional retirement age is a long runway. Not as long as someone who's 25, obviously, but long enough that the choices you make now can still radically change your outcome. Let me show you some simple math to make this concrete. Say you're 40 and you've got basically nothing saved for retirement. Depressing starting point, but let's work with it. If you can save $500 a month and invest it in a diversified portfolio that historically returns something like 7% annually after inflation, in 25 years you'd have roughly $400,000. That's not nothing. That's a meaningful retirement supplement. Now imagine you can push that to $1,000 a month. Same assumptions. You're looking at around $800,000. Add in Social Security benefits, maybe some part-time work and early retirement, and you've got a workable situation. Not luxury, but stability. But here's where it gets interesting. If you're starting behind, you can't just match what everyone else is doing. You need to accelerate. Financial planners often recommend saving 15% of your income for retirement as a baseline. If you're playing catch-up at 40, you probably need to be thinking more like 20 to 30% if you can possibly swing it. That sounds brutal, I know, but reframe it. What you're really doing is buying back your future. Every dollar you save and invest now isn't just a dollar. It's a dollar that can grow, potentially doubling or more before you retire. The $20 you don't spend on something forgettable today could be $40 or $50 in retirement purchasing power. And here's the psychological shift that matters. When you start seeing money this way, as future freedom instead of present deprivation, saving stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like power. You're not denying yourself. You're paying your future self first. Let's talk about what actually moves the needle, because there's a lot of noise out there about latte factors and cutting small expenses, and honestly, most of it misses the point.
Yes, mindless spending adds up, but the real game changers are the big fixed costs and the big income decisions. Housing. The average American spends about 30% of their income on housing, and in many cities, it's pushing 40 or 50%. If you're spending half your paycheck on rent or a mortgage, you're fighting an almost impossible battle. The math just doesn't work. So, if you're behind and need to catch up, one of the most powerful moves might be geographic arbitrage, moving somewhere with a lower cost of living, or house hacking, renting out part of your space, or downsizing. These aren't fun conversations, but they're the ones that actually create room to save. Transportation. The average new car payment in America is now over $700 a month. $700. That's $8,400 a year, not counting insurance, gas, and maintenance. And here's the thing, that car loses value the moment you drive it off the lot, while it's draining money that could be building wealth. If you're driving a financial emergency and calling it transportation, that's one of the first things to reconsider. A reliable used car gets you to the same places. Career and income. This is the lever most people underutilize. Cutting expenses has a floor. You can only cut so much before you're living in misery, but income has no ceiling. And in your 40s, you should be in prime earning years. If you haven't pushed for raises, if you haven't considered switching companies, if you haven't invested in skills that make you more valuable, you're leaving money on the table. Research consistently shows that changing jobs is one of the most effective ways to increase income. People who stay at the same company for years often see 2 to 3% annual raises, if they're lucky. People who strategically change jobs can see 10, 15, even 20% bumps. Not every year, but enough times to dramatically change their lifetime earnings. And here's something that changes when you have even a small financial cushion. Your negotiating power transforms. When you're broke, you take whatever job offers come your way. You accept whatever salary they give you because you can't afford to say no. But when you've got 6 months of expenses saved, when you've got some investments building in the background, you can negotiate from strength. You can ask for what you're worth. You can walk away from bad offers. You can take calculated risks on better opportunities. This is what I mean when I talk about the real value of hitting financial milestones. It's not just the money, it's who you become in the process and the options that open up because of it. Think about what you have to do to actually save consistently. You have to track your spending, which means confronting uncomfortable truths. You have to say no to some things you want in the moment. You have to stay consistent month after month, even when it's boring, even when nobody's watching. These skills, delayed gratification, self-awareness, consistency, they're not just financial skills, they're life skills. They're the same muscles that help you build a career, maintain relationships, and achieve anything meaningful. By the time you've built real financial stability, you've proven something to yourself. You've proven that you can control your money instead of letting it control you. That identity shift is worth more than any specific dollar amount. Now, let's talk about the trap that catches people exactly when they're starting to make progress: lifestyle creep. You get a raise, you're earning more than ever, and somehow 6 months later, you're still not saving any more than before. Where did the money go? Nicer apartment, better car, more dinners out, premium subscriptions? It all just sort of happened. This is how people who earn 6 figures end up broke. I'm not exaggerating. Surveys show that a significant percentage of households earning over $100,000 still live paycheck to paycheck. High income does not automatically mean wealth. Wealth comes from the gap between what you earn and what you spend, invested over time. If that gap is zero, it doesn't matter if you earn $50,000 or $500,000. If you're playing catch-up, you cannot afford lifestyle creep. Every raise, every bonus, every windfall should be spoken for before it hits your checking account. Automatic transfers to investments, debt paydown, emergency fund top-ups, the money should be allocated to your priorities, not your impulses. Another trap, treating savings milestones as spending rewards. You finally hit $20,000 in savings and you think, I deserve to celebrate. I'll just take a nice vacation. Suddenly, you're back at $15,000. Then you hit 20 again, and there's another reward. This cycle can go on for years without you really getting ahead. The milestone isn't a finish line, it's a checkpoint. The celebration is staying above it, not dipping back below. Let me talk about what actually to do if you're 40 or approaching it and you're behind. This is the catch-up plan. First, get absolutely clear on where you are. This means knowing your net worth, which is everything you own minus everything you owe. It means knowing your monthly income and expenses, not vaguely, precisely. Most people have never done this honestly. They have a general sense that things are probably fine or kinda tight. That vagueness is expensive. You need real numbers. Second, attack high-interest debt aggressively. If you're carrying credit card balances, that's a guaranteed negative return of 15, 18, sometimes 25%. No investment can reliably beat that. Pay it off. Cut up the cards if you have to. Do whatever it takes to stop the bleeding. Third, build that emergency fund. Even if you can only save $100 a month, start. The goal is 3 to 6 months of expenses, but even 1 month is infinitely better than nothing. This is the buffer that keeps everything else from falling apart when life throws a curveball. Fourth, max out tax-advantaged accounts as fast as you can. If your employer offers a 401k match, get every penny of that match. That's free money, an instant 100% return. Beyond that, max out your contributions if possible. The contribution limits are higher for people over 50, which is a designed catch-up provision. But even in your 40s, you should be pushing toward the maximum if your income allows. Fifth, think seriously about your income, not just cutting expenses, but increasing what's coming in. Can you ask for a raise? Can you take on additional responsibilities for more pay? Can you switch companies? Can you develop a side income? The fastest way to catch up is to expand the gap between earning and spending from both directions simultaneously. Sixth, adjust your expectations honestly. If you're 40 with minimal savings, you might not be able to retire at 60 on your terms. That's okay. Retirement at 65 or 67 with some part-time work you enjoy is still a worthy goal. Maybe you won't have the dream house or the luxury vacations, but financial peace, the ability to cover your needs and have some freedom, that's absolutely achievable. Don't let perfect be the enemy of possible. And let me say something about the psychology of all this, because it matters more than any tactic. If you're behind, you might feel shame. You might feel like it's too late. You might feel like you've already failed and there's no point trying now. Those feelings are natural, but they're also lies your brain tells you to avoid discomfort. The truth is, the best time to start wealth was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Every day you wait is a day of potential compounding you'll never get back, but every day you act is a step toward a different future. The person who starts at 40 and stays consistent will be in a radically different place at 60 than the person who gave up because they felt too far behind. There's something powerful about accepting where you are without shame and then taking action. You can't change the past, you can only change what happens next. And what happens next is entirely up to you. If you're still watching at this point, I'm going to assume you're serious about this. You're not just casually browsing, you're actually thinking about making changes. So here's the highly principles that matter most. Build a realistic emergency fund before you do anything fancy with investing. Keep your big fixed costs, housing, transportation, under control, even if it means making uncomfortable choices. Automate your saving and investing so it happens without you having to decide each month. Focus on increasing your income over time, because that's the lever with the most room to move. Avoid chasing hot tips, timing the market, or getting drawn into speculation. Simple, boring, diversified investing in low-cost index funds historically beaten most actively managed strategies anyway. And remember the core idea of everything I've said today. 40 isn't a deadline, it's a wake-up call. It's the moment where you either get serious or you let another decade slip by. The people who end up financially secure aren't necessarily the ones who started perfectly. They're the ones who woke up, got honest about their situation, and started building, even when it felt late. You have more control than you think. The next 25 years can look completely different from the last 25, but only if you start now. only if you stay consistent, only if you stop comparing yourself to highlight reels and start running your own race. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. What's one financial decision from your past that you'd do differently if you could go back? Maybe it was a car, maybe it was a job you stayed in too long, maybe it was debt you took on that didn't make sense. Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it, because the more honest we are about past mistakes, the better we get at avoiding future ones. If this video helped you see your finances differently, or if it gave you a kick in the pants you needed, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Because the clock is ticking differently now, but it's not too late to make it.